I picked up my son's coat from the dry cleaners. The owner, an old acquaintance, pulled me aside and whispered, "Take your grandchildren and leave town before dawn." Stunned, I asked why. He showed me a bag. "I found this in your son's coat." Looking inside, I was paralyzed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. As dusk fell, the day's heat still clung to my fingers as I carried the heavy grocery basket. Sweat soaked through my shirt, and I walked slowly down the old street where the peeling walls told the story of so many years in this town. Mr. Thompson's dry cleaning shop appeared at the corner. The faded wooden sign swung in the wind. I stopped, pulling the yellowed, crumpled receipt from my pocket. That morning, David, my son, had placed it in my hand with a gentle but hurried voice. "Dad, please pick up my wool jacket from Mr. Thompson's. I have meetings all day." I'd agreed without giving it much thought. For me, it was just another task like so many others I always did for my children. Entering, the smell of fabric softener mixed with steam escaping from a corner. Mr. Thompson, an elderly man with glasses sliding down his nose, was behind the counter, flipping through a notebook with his bony hands. I handed him the paper. He looked at it and nodded without saying anything. He went to the back room. Normally, he would send the young man who worked with him, but that day he went himself, walking slowly, as if trying to buy time. I waited without concern, stroking the basket handle, thinking only about what I would cook that evening for my grandchildren. He returned with David's jacket, carefully wrapped in clear plastic, smelling of fabric softener. But instead of handing it to me, he paused. He looked around the room, making sure no one else was there. I found this strange, and before I could ask questions, his rough, calloused hand gripped my arm firmly. "Granville," he murmured in a hoarse voice, almost a whisper. "Come here for a moment." Without giving me time to react, he led me behind a worn curtain covering the back of the establishment. The smell of chlorine and steam made breathing difficult. Piles of unironed clothes were stacked like a disorderly wall, hiding something. "You need to see this," he said in a trembling voice while opening a fragile drawer under the counter. From there, he pulled out a small, transparent plastic bag, small enough to make my heart race. Inside was a bank transfer receipt stamped in red, with a number so large I had to look several times to make sure I wasn't mistaken. Tens of thousands of dollars. Who would keep such a thing in a jacket pocket? And next to the paper, a photograph. The innocent faces of Emily and Noah, my grandchildren, with circles drawn in red marker. They were twisted, angry circles, as if they had been drawn in a fit of rage, or worse yet, with sinister intent. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. My hands were cold as ice. "Mr. Thompson, what is this?" I stammered, my voice muffled. He shook his head. His eyes were full of fear, as if he couldn't bear what he had found himself. Granville, you must take your grandchildren immediately. Don't waste a second. You must leave before dawn." His voice was hoarse, almost pleading. I wanted to ask more questions. I wanted an explanation. But he simply pushed the bag into my hand, repeating what he had said. "I can't keep this here. It's too frightening." I took the jacket with hands so shaky I almost dropped it. I put the bag deep in my pocket, feeling like I was carrying a bomb about to explode. As I left, my steps were unsteady, as if I was walking on air without feeling the ground beneath my feet. He handed me my basket, A few tomatoes rolled, nearly falling onto the sidewalk. Outside, the world continued its usual bustle. Bus brakes squealing, street vendors shouting, children's laughter as they ran down the street. But in my head, only Mr. Thompson's insistent voice echoed, repeating like an ominous bell before dawn. The sky darkened. The shadow of twilight was swallowed by the dense night. I entered the house with heavy steps as if carrying stones. The sealed envelope containing the terrible secret was still deep in my pocket, burning like a curse. The large house, once filled with Emily and Noah's laughter, now stood frozen in silence. Michael, my son, was on a business trip to Chicago, hundreds of miles away. It was just me, my two grandchildren, and the terrible void that David had left behind. My phone vibrated. A short message from my son. Dad, I have an unexpected meeting. I'm going to be very late. Please take care of the kids. I looked at the words on the screen, and in my chest, a nameless worry was born. Was it true or just an excuse to hide something? I entered the living room where Emily and Noah were focused, playing with blocks on the old carpet. Emily, the 8-year-old girl with big round eyes, was carefully building a little house with colorful pieces. Grandpa, look, my house has a chimney, she exclaimed joyfully in a voice as clear as bells. Noah, the little boy of only 5, was beside her, clutching a plastic dinosaur, humming a wordless song. Seeing them hurt my heart. A few hours ago, I thought they were safe in their family's arms, but now, the image of the 2 red circles on the photo haunted me like an invisible threat lurking somewhere. I forced a smile and stroked Emily's head. Very nice, my love. Rest a bit. Grandpa will prepare dinner. But everything was spinning in my head. Mr. Thompson's voice kept echoing. We must leave before dawn. I didn't know what I was running from. But my grandfather's instinct told me these 2 children couldn't stay a minute longer. I went quietly to my room, closed the door, and with a trembling hand dialed Dr. Harris's number, a doctor friend whom I fully trusted. Dr. Harris and I had been through so many trials together since the difficult years, raising children until the early hours of the morning, taking care of my wife in the hospital. If there was someone I could trust now, it was him. Hello, Dr. Harris. It's me, Granville, I whispered. My voice nodded with worry. I need your help. Do you know a reliable taxi, one that could make a long journey tonight? Doctor. Harris was silent for a moment, perhaps sensing the strangeness in my voice. Granville, what's going on? Why the urgency? I breathed deeply. I held back my tears. I can't explain right now. I just need a taxi as soon as possible. Doctor? Harris didn't press. He simply responded briefly. I'll call my brother. He's a driver. Very discreet. Wait 15 minutes. I nodded, even knowing he couldn't see me, and hung up. My heart heavy. I went to the kitchen. My hands moved quickly. I took bread from the cupboard, cut a few slices of cheese, set aside some cookies the children loved. I placed a few water bottles in a small bag, wondering what else to take. I didn't know where to go. I only knew my grandchildren should not go hungry. I looked in the living room. Emily was showing Noah how to build a bridge. Their laughter was like knives in my chest. They so innocent, so carefree without imagining the storm that was about to hit our family. I wondered if I was wrong, if everything was a misunderstanding and I was overreacting. But then the image of the photo with the 2 red circles reappeared in my mind, and I realized I had no other choice. I ran to the children's room, opened the closet, and took some clothes, Emily's favorite blue sweater, Noah's superhero pajamas, several pairs of socks. I also took the wool doll that Emily always clutched when sleeping, and the little car Noah never parted with. I threw everything into a large suitcase in disarray, but there was no time to organize it all. The streetlight came through the window, flashing like sinister fireworks, making my heart beat faster. I closed the curtains, fearing a curious neighbor might notice my strange behavior. This town is small. Everyone knows everyone, and I didn't want anyone asking questions. My phone vibrated again. "Doctor," Harris wrote. "The taxi has arrived. It's at the corner. My brother's name is James. You can trust him." I breathed deeply, trying to calm myself. I went into the living room, knelt beside Emily, and gently shook her shoulder. "Come, my love," I whispered in the softest voice I could muster. "Put on your coat. We're going for a night walk." Emily looked up, eyes wide, surprised. "A night walk where, Grandpa?" I smiled even though I was tied up inside. "To a very fun place, but we need to go now, otherwise it will be too late." Noah rubbed his eyes, starting to complain about being disturbed. "I'm sleepy, Grandpa," he murmured drowsy. I pulled a candy from my pocket and placed it in his hand. "Take this. Be good. Come with me. You can go back to sleep afterward." Noah smiled widely and quickly forgot his fatigue. I took him in my arms. I took Emily's hand and ran to the waiting taxi at the corner. The hallway leading to the door seemed endless. My sandals dragged on the cold floor, hurried and trembling. I settled the children on the back seat and carefully fastened their seat belts. Emily clutched her doll, looking at me curiously, but still with trust. Noah yawned widely, resting his head on his sister's shoulder. I sat beside them, holding my suitcase against my chest, heart heavy. The driver, a middle-aged man with a tired face, looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Where are you going at this hour?" he asked, concerned. I swallowed, my voice strangled. "To the train station, please, as quickly as possible." The car started, breaking the silence of the night. Through the window, I watched the house disappear into the darkness, like a tomb that keeps secrets and betrayals. Penn Station at midnight was as lively as a market that never sleeps. Green and red neon lights shone on old posters, dazzling my eyes. The cries of street vendors, bus horns, and the squeak of suitcases rolling on concrete blended into a chaotic concert. And yet, this disorder made me feel safer, as if my grandchildren and I could get lost in the crowd and escape the invisible gaze that was watching us. I firmly held Emily's hand. Noah slept deeply on my shoulder, his warm breath on my neck, reminding me to stay strong, even if I felt broken inside. I approached the ticket counter, trying to appear calm as I asked, "3 tickets to Miami, the last train of the day." The seller, a man with a disheveled mustache, looked at me and the children. Then he slid 3 tickets through the window. "It's leaving right now. Board quickly or you'll miss it," he said in a monotone voice. I nodded. I paid and turned to Emily, forcing a smile. "We're going to visit a distant relative. We're going to have fun." The little girl nodded, though her big eyes reflected curiosity. "Which relative? Grandpa, do I know them?" I stroked her head, avoiding her gaze. "It's a relative from before. You haven't met them yet. Get some sleep. The journey is long." Emily nodded again, clutching her wool doll tightly and staring out the train window. The train departed. The noise of the engine broke the silence of the night. Noah fell asleep on my shoulder. head down and hand still holding his little car. I watched the streetlights pass by, blurry like fading memories. Miami, where I had lived more than 15 years ago, was the only option that came to mind at that moment. That's where my wife and I had built the first years of our marriage, where Michael was born, and where one day I had felt safe. Now I just hoped this city would be a refuge for the three of us, even if only temporary. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just running away. I was looking for a way to face a truth I didn't yet dare to name. When we arrived in Miami, it was already dawn. The pale light of dawn filtered through the old rooftops. I took Noah and led Emily to a small inn hidden behind the central square. The room was narrow with a slight musty smell and a double bed covered with faded sheets. I settled both children in the bed and tucked them in. Grandpa," Emily murmured in her sleep. "Where's Dad?" This question pierced my heart like a dagger. I just stroked her head and whispered, "Sleep, my darling. Your father is busy. He'll be back soon." But I knew well it was a lie. David, the son I had loved so much, was now an enigma, a dark shadow I didn't dare confront. I sat by the window, hands interlaced and mind boiling. The plastic bag was still in my coat pocket, heavy as a curse. The transfer receipt, the photo with 2 red circles, and Mr. Thompson's warning. These were pieces of a puzzle that I didn't even know where to start. I thought about Michael, my other son, who was far away. I wanted to call him, tell him everything. But every time I picked up the phone, I stopped. If I was wrong, if it was all a misunderstanding, it would destroy his family. But if I was right, if David was really involved in something terrible, how could I tell his brother that the man he admired, Emily and Noah's father, might betray us? Amidst the confusion, an idea came to me. I had to go to church. Father James, the old priest of Miami, was the only one I could trust at that moment. He was with me when my wife died. He held my hand in my darkest days. If anyone could help me find the way, it was him. I decided that morning I would take Emily and Noah to Mass to pray for peace and also to seek a way out. The next day, I woke up Emily and Noah. I helped them get dressed. "Come to church with me, and afterward I'll buy you ice cream," I told them, feigning joy in my voice. Noah exclaimed enthusiastically, "Chocolate." "Grandpa," I smiled and nodded, even though I was worried inside. We walked to St. Sir Patrick's Church, where the old stone walls and the sound of bells conveyed an unusual feeling of calm. Emily took my hand while Noah ran ahead, with his little car clutched in his fingers. Looking at them, all I asked was to be able to preserve this innocence forever. Father James recognized me as soon as I entered the church. His white hair shone in the light coming through the stained glass windows, and his kind but penetrating eyes looked at me. "Granville, it's been a long time. What are you doing here with your grandchildren? Is something wrong?" I simply nodded, unable to speak in front of the children. After Mass, I let Emily and Noah play in the church courtyard where other children were running. I asked Father James to talk privately in a small, quiet room behind the altar. The smell of old wood and melted wax helped me breathe better. Gathering my courage, I told him everything. David's jacket, the transfer receipt of a huge sum, and the photo of Emily and Noah with 2 frightening red circles. I handed him the plastic bag with a trembling hand. Father James remained silent for a long time. His hands clenched, his face hardened. Finally, he sighed and said in a deep voice, "Granville, this goes beyond what a priest can bear. This isn't just a family matter. It's a much greater danger. You need someone who understands the law. He paused. He looked at me with deep concern. I know someone who can help. Sarah. A lawyer and very good parishioner here. She will know what to do. I nodded, feeling a ray of hope glimmer in the darkness. That same afternoon, in the small confessional, I met Sarah for the first time. She was young, perhaps a little over 40, had short hair and eyes so piercing they seemed to see everything. She wore latex gloves, opened the bag carefully, and examined the receipt under the yellowish light. "This transaction code belongs to a shell company registered in Orlando," she said, typing quickly on her laptop. Her face was serious and focused. "A non-existent company," she added, pointing to the last line of the document signed by Richard Hayes. This name meant nothing to me. But when Sarah looked at Father James, they exchanged a meaningful glance. "This man has been involved in financial fraud and money laundering," Sarah said quietly. "This is nothing simple. Granville." I felt my hands pressed on the wooden table begin to tremble. "But why my grandchildren? Why are their faces marked in red?" I asked, my voice breaking. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She simply looked at me with compassion. "We need to investigate further," she finally said. "But first, you and the children must stay here where you're safe. I'll contact some trusted colleagues to investigate." Father James placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. "Granville, God will protect you and your grandchildren, but you must be strong for them." I hugged Emily and Noah as we left the church while the gray evening covered the cobbled streets. The bells rang behind, reminding me I was no longer alone. The next day, I found myself in front of the door of an inn in Miami, my heart on fire. Emily and Noah were playing in Dr. Harris's yard, my old doctor friend whom I fully trusted. Through the wooden fence, I observed them. Emily was teaching Noah how to blow soap bubbles, and their crystalline laughter filled the sunny morning. I smiled, but this smile weighed as if every second I spent there was stolen. "Dr. Harris, can you take care of the children for a day?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I need to go back to town to solve some important personal problems." "Doctor?" Harris looked at me. His piercing eyes seemed to want to ask more, but he simply nodded. "Don't worry, Granville. The children will be fine with me. I'll make them a custard and tell them stories." I shook his hand without saying more, but with infinite gratitude in my heart. I took the first morning train to return to Philadelphia, curled up in the back seat with the zipped bag still in my coat pocket, as a constant reminder of the terrible secret I carried. The landscape passed by the window, the dry fields, the dilapidated houses. But I saw nothing but the image of the two red circles on the photo of Emily and Noah. I wondered what I was doing, if it was right to leave my grandchildren behind and return to this dangerous place, but I knew that if I wanted to protect them, I had to discover the truth. As cruel as it might be, the family home appeared when the train stopped at the last station. It was silent, cold. It was no longer the home that my son and I had built over so many years. Now it looked like a crime scene waiting to be discovered. I pulled out the spare key from the bottom of my bag. With a trembling hand, I opened the gate. The squeaking of the hinges echoed in the silence, making me turn my head in surprise. The street was deserted. Only a few dogs barked in the distance. I entered and closed the door, feeling like I was crossing into another world where everything I had believed in could collapse. The living room was as it was the day before when I left it, David's light blanket thrown carelessly on the couch as if he had been there just a few hours ago. Next to it, A half-drunk cup of coffee. The dried foam turned into a brown stain. I stood there looking around trying to find a sign, a clue that would explain what was happening. But the air inside the house was heavy, as if even the walls kept secrets. I didn't hesitate any longer and went straight to David's room, where I knew there was something I needed to check under the wardrobe. The small gray safe was still there, motionless like a silent accomplice. I remembered Michael's birthday a few months ago when David, drunk after several glasses of champagne, blurted out the combination aloud while laughing with me. "Dad, you can't imagine. Michael always tells me to change the code, but I like this one. April 15th, 2020, the day of the wedding." At that moment, I just laughed, thinking it was an unimportant detail. But now this sequence was the key to opening the door to the truth. I knelt, pulled out the dust-covered safe. My hands trembled as I turned each number, 150420. The sharp click echoed like a gunshot in the silence, making my heart jump. I opened the heavy safe door, breathing heavily. Inside, bundles of dollar bills stacked in order. The green bills shone and left me stunned. Hundreds, perhaps millions of dollars, a sum my family had never dreamed of possessing. Next to them, a stack of forged passports and ID cards with unknown names. Mary Lockwood, John Dumont, David Morrell. I flipped through them one by one, my heart pounding as if I were reading the list of ghosts. In a corner, there were 2 sealed cell phones ready to be activated in some plan. But what took my breath away were the papers at the bottom. 3 business-class plane tickets from Philadelphia to Los Angeles in the name of David, Emily, and Noah. Michael's name wasn't on them. I checked them again and again, hoping I was mistaken. But the cold truth was like a knife piercing my chest. David was planning to escape, take my grandchildren, and leave his brother as an obstacle. I pulled out one more envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a photo. David smiling radiantly next to an unknown man, elegant in a black suit. Behind the photo, a handwritten scroll. My Richard. This name, Richard Hayes, matched the signature on the transfer receipt. The whole room began to spin. The air thickened, and I had trouble breathing. I sat on the floor, my back against the furniture. The photo fell from my hands. David, the son I had loved as the apple of my eye, the one who cooked with me during family meals, the one who hugged me crying when Michael had problems at work. This man was betraying us. He wasn't just betraying his brother. He was also planning to take my 2 grandchildren, as if they were part of a plan. I thought of Emily, with her innocent smile when she drew for me, and Noah, with that habit of kissing my knees every time I cooked. How could he be so cruel? How could he circle their faces with a red marker, as if they were merchandise at that moment? The familiar sound of Mr. Pierre's motorcycle echoed in the street. I jumped, hurried. I put everything back in the safe, trying to leave it as before. My hands were shaking so much that a passport fell, but I managed to pick it up. I pushed the safe back to its place and closed it. My heart was beating so hard it sounded like that of a guilty person. I got up, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and tried to calm down. As I went to the door, I saw a torn envelope in the kitchen trash with the logo of a foreign bank shining under the light. Instinctively, I took it. I put it in my jacket pocket without thinking. When the door closed behind me with a slam, I went out into the street as if I were floating. I knew I wasn't just running away. In my pocket, I carried proof of a terrible plan. David was planning to run away with Richard, taking a fortune, abandoning his brother, Michael, and worse yet, taking my two grandchildren as part of the plan. I returned to the inn in Miami, my legs as heavy as lead, and my pockets still containing those horrible proofs from the house. It was already noon. The dim sunlight filtered through the slits of the thin curtains and fell on the old wooden floor. Emily and Noah had just woken up from their nap. They were on the bed rubbing their eyes. Emily, with tousled hair, lifted her face to me, her big innocent eyes. "Grandpa, when are we going home with Dad?" Her question was like a knife to the chest. I knelt, stroked her hair, and tried to smile, although I knew the smile was forced. "Soon, my love. Your dad is busy with something. Stay a few more days with me." My throat tightened. I couldn't say more. Noah, clutching his plastic dinosaur, interrupted. "Grandpa, I want cookies." I nodded. I pulled out a package from my bag and gave it to him just to hide that my hands were still shaking. I took the two grandchildren to the small courtyard of the inn where there was an old swing. "Play for a moment. I'll watch you from here," I told them, trying to appear calm, but inside I felt I was on the edge of the abyss. What I had found in the safe, bundles of money, forged passports, plane tickets, and the photo of David with Richard kept tormenting me. I knew I couldn't stay here forever or continue to flee without facing the truth. But how could I protect my grandchildren if their own father, whom I had once trusted, was part of this nightmare? In the afternoon, Sarah arrived. Her steps were quick, but her eyes reflected concern. She was accompanied by two men in civilian clothes. Although their appearance clearly revealed cold professionalism, they introduced themselves as judicial police officers, showing badges with official seals. "To Granville, I'm Officer Ramirez," one of them said in a grave and firm voice. "This is my colleague, Officer Thompson. We need to see everything you found." I nodded and led them to the narrow rental room, where a small wooden table had become the center of all truth. I laid everything out on the table, the receipt for a transfer with a huge sum, the bank envelope, a photo of David smiling alongside Richard, 3 plane tickets to Los Angeles, and a stack of forged passports. Each item was like a new stab, reminding me of my son's betrayal. Officer Thompson took a still-sealed phone and connected it via a USB cable to a small device. His laptop screen lit up, showing command lines scrolling at high speed. "We can recover deleted data," he said without looking up. "These things usually keep more information than people think." I sat, hands interlaced, heart beating hard. Outside, Emily and Noah played in the courtyard. Their laughter reached inside, but I dared not look. I felt that if I lost a second of control, I would let out the pain that was suffocating me. After a few minutes of tension, Thompson turned the screen to me. There was a folder of photos, and in the first appeared again the image of Emily and Noah. Their innocent faces were circled in red marker, deformed with cruel intention. I held my breath as if the air in the room had disappeared. Officer Ramirez pointed to the screen, his voice lowered in tone as if he wanted to prevent me from collapsing. "Sir, this isn't a personal mark. It's a symbol used in human trafficking networks." The word trafficking resonated like thunder, leaving me paralyzed. He enlarged the image and showed a series of tiny numbers in the corner. "This is a transaction code. The red circle means selected target. The children are part of a much bigger plan." Instinctively, I embraced my grandchildren in my thoughts, though they were outside, as if I could protect them from this terrible truth. My eyes filled with tears, but I refused to cry. I didn't want the little ones to see me like this. You mean they plan to sell my grandchildren? I asked in a trembling voice, barely audible. Ramirez nodded with a compassionate look. We don't yet know the entire plan, but these proofs point to an organized criminal network, and the man in this photo, he pointed to David, is very likely an accomplice. Sarah placed her hand on my shoulder, and her voice trembled. 2. Granville, this is no longer a family matter. This is an extremely serious criminal case. We will do everything possible to protect the children. But her words failed to calm the storm in me. David, the son I had loved as the apple of my eye, the one who was with me when Noah was born, the one who shared laughs during so many family evenings. How could he be so cruel? How could he turn 2 children, his own flesh and blood, into targets of a dirty business? Thompson continued typing on the laptop, extracting messages that had been deleted. A short but cold message appeared. 2 targets chosen. Ensure delivery on time. The message had been sent from David's number to an unknown number signed R.H. Richard Hayes. I felt the blood in my body as if it were freezing. He really did this, I murmured, without knowing who I was talking to. Sarah took my hand, squeezing it gently. Granville, I know it hurts a lot, but you must be strong for your grandchildren. I was told to stay calm, to act as if nothing had happened. Don't communicate with David, Ramirez said in a firm voice. He must not know what you've discovered. We need time to investigate further. I nodded, but my heart was in a ball. How could I pretend normalcy when every breath carried the pain of betrayal? Woe. Could I look Emily and Noah in the eye knowing that their father had planned to sell them as merchandise? I brought the 2 grandchildren back to the room, trying to play with them, as always. Grandpa, tell me the vampire story, insisted Noah, climbing onto my lap. I hugged the little boy and told him the story he loves. But my voice broke as if I myself were lost in a nightmare. Emily was beside, drawing with colored pencils, humming a song. I looked at her, and my chest hurt, as if it were being cut. They were carefree, innocent, not knowing that their world had been about to be destroyed by the same father they loved. Outside, black clouds moved in, and a sudden downpour fell. The rain hit the tin roof of the inn hard, marking the rhythm of the disorder in my chest. I drew the curtains. I hugged the children, trying to protect them from the storm outside and the storm within me. The next morning, a black car stopped in front of the inn. No license plate, no lights. But I knew it was a Federal Bureau of Investigation vehicle. Sarah had called earlier to warn me to get ready. Granville, today we're going to plan everything, she said on the phone, her voice assured, albeit with a touch of concern. I quickly put on a sweater. I woke the 2 grandchildren and asked them to stay with Dr. Harris one more day. Where are you going? Grandpa asked Emily with those curious big eyes. I stroked her head, trying to force a smile. I'm going to see an old friend. I'll be back this afternoon to see you. Noah, nibbling on a cookie, nodded without asking more questions. I gave them a kiss on the forehead and went out to the car, heart heavy, as if I were carrying the whole world on my shoulders. The FBI office in Miami was hidden behind a narrow street, with no sign indicating that serious matters were being handled there. I entered and was led to a small meeting room where the smell of old coffee and papers hung in the air. Sarah was already waiting for me, sitting at a long table. Across there were 3 officers, Ramirez, Thompson, and an officer named Sylvia, whose gaze was both severe and gentle. Granville, we have examined the evidence you gave us. Ramirez began in a grave but sharp voice. This is a big case linked to an international criminal network. We need your cooperation to capture David and Richard. They explained the plan: create a fictional scene where Emily and Noah had disappeared to panic David and Richard and reveal their movements. We'll monitor all their communications, said Sylvia, pointing to a screen showing the map of the city. We've installed a listening device on David's phone, and we're tracking Richard's number. They will communicate with each other, and then we'll have enough evidence. I listened, but my heart tightened. And will my grandchildren be safe? I asked in a trembling voice, unable to hide my fear. Sylvia placed her hand on my shoulder with a firm, tranquil gaze. We have planned an absolutely safe refuge for the children. You can make video calls whenever you want to see them. I was taken to another room where a social worker was playing with Emily and Noah in a room full of toys. Emily was coloring a drawing, and Noah was building with Legos while murmuring a story about a spaceship. Looking at them, I wanted to cry. They didn't know I was trying to protect them from their own father. Granville, the children will stay here with me, said the social worker in a gentle voice. I'll take care of them as if they were my own children. I nodded. I hugged my 2 grandchildren tightly once more before leaving, feeling like I was leaving a part of my heart. That evening, I returned to the inn and sat alone in the small room, phone in hand, waiting. Sarah and Thompson were with me. The listening device was on the table, and the laptop screen glowed with the messages being monitored. As planned, my phone vibrated. A message from David in a desperate tone. Dad, where are you? Have you seen the kids? They've disappeared. I called the police. I'm scared to death. I read the message and felt my heart tighten. How could he pretend like this? How could he write these words when he himself had planned to take my grandchildren? Thompson indicated not to respond. He simply gently shook his head. Let him entangle himself, he murmured. Half an hour later, David's phone called an unknown number. The listening device activated, and his voice rang out on the speaker, nervous and trembling. Richard, the children have disappeared. I had everything prepared, but I can't find them anywhere. The voice of the man at the other end was hoarse and annoyed. Calm down. We cannot turn back now. The plane tickets are already bought. The buyer on the other side is waiting. If we don't have the merchandise, we'll have a big problem. The word buyer was like a knife sinking into my skin. I clenched my fist, nails digging into my palm, trying to contain my tears. Emily and Noah, my 2 little angels, being called merchandise. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go confront David. But Thompson signaled me to keep silent with a cold look. The call ended, but David continued sending messages to Richard. If we don't find the children, the whole plan will collapse. You have to do something. Thompson sketched an icy smile. Let it collapse. That's how it should be, he said in a grave voice. This confession will be irrefutable evidence at trial. Sarah took my hand and squeezed it gently, as if to give me strength. Granville, we're almost done, she said, but her voice also broke as if she herself felt my pain. I stayed there, hands icy, clenched, feeling both deep fear and strange relief. Relief because I knew David and Richard were digging their own grave. But the pain continued to compress my chest. I thought of days gone by when David was a shy young man, newly graduated, when he would sit with me in the kitchen, kneading bread and telling me about his dream of opening a small shop. I loved him. I thought he was a good father. But now, every memory was like a wound that opened more each time I recalled it. Outside the window, the night was thick, without a single star. I heard the soft murmur of several car engines without lights, quietly parked at the corner of the street. They were like beasts lying in wait, patiently waiting for the right moment. I looked at Sarah, then Thompson, and felt I was entering a chess game whose end I didn't know. "Granville, you did what needed to be done," Sarah said in a low but firm voice. "You saved your grandchildren." I nodded, but inwardly I began to doubt. Had I really saved them, or was I simply dragging them into a new nightmare? That night, darkness covered Miami like a dense veil. I was sitting in an FBI command vehicle parked 2 streets away from a cheap hotel on the outskirts. The air inside the car was heavy, with the smell of motor oil and cold coffee mixing, and making my breathing even more difficult. Sarah was by my side, her gaze hard as steel, but with hands strongly interlaced as if trying to contain her tension. Officer Sylvia, who had reassured me that morning, adjusted the radio, her voice grave but clear. "Granville, just stay here. Listen, we'll take care of everything." But how could I be calm if my heart was beating so hard it seemed to want to jump out of my chest? Emily and Noah were safe in the police playroom. But the mere fact of knowing I was about to witness my son's betrayal made me tremble. Through the radio, short orders were heard, sharp as knives. "Alpha Team, position at the northeast corner. Bravo Team, control at the rear exit. Target heading to the meeting point." I clenched my hands tightly, nails digging into my palms, trying not to show my fear. Sarah placed a hand on my shoulder and murmured, "Granville, everything will end tonight. You did well to get the children out of there." I nodded, but tears were already silently flowing down my cheeks. Did well. What had I done besides run and ask for help? However, deep in my heart, I knew I had no other choice. I had to protect my grandchildren, even if the price to pay was facing the heartbreaking truth about my son, whom I had once loved as the apple of my eye. Sylvia opened the live transmission from the listening device, and David's voice resonated, trembling and rushed. "Richard, I don't understand. Where are they without them? What will we deliver in the deal?" Every word cut me like a knife. Deal. This word made me want to scream, to throw myself at him and slap him. How could he call Emily and Noah his own children as if they were merchandise? Richard's hoarse and harsh voice replied, "Shut up. Let's go to the hotel first. The intermediary is already waiting for us there. If we don't bring the merchandise, we're finished." I held my breath, as if the air inside the car had evaporated. Intermediary merchandise. These words were needles in my chest, reminding me that this wasn't just a family betrayal, but a monstrous crime. Sylvia whispered into the radio, "The target has entered the parking lot. Prepare to act." Through the microphone, I heard the sharp sound of a door closing, then rapid footsteps on cement. I imagined David and Richard, 2 tense figures, advancing toward the empty parking lot without knowing they were walking straight into the trap set by the police. Suddenly, a firm cry tore through the calm. FBI hands in the air. The crash of boots running, the clapping of flashlights turning on, and then a sharp scream from David so cutting it tore through the night. "No, it's not possible," he cried in a voice full of terror. Through the radio, I heard sounds of struggle. "Richard, run!" David shouted. But immediately an officer ordered, "Don't move! Raise your hands or I'll shoot!" A blow was heard. Then Richard's body falling to the ground next to a white van. "Don't move," ordered another voice. I heard the metallic sound of handcuffs tightening. David was crying, his voice in pieces, You're mistaken. I didn't do anything. But I immediately heard his bag drop to the ground, bundles of money coming into view, and the cold voice of an officer. Do you have anything else to say? Sitting in the car. I could no longer contain myself. Tears silently flowed down my cheeks. I didn't know if I was crying with relief because the trap had worked, or with pain at the truth that David, whom I had considered a good son, had been ready to sell his own children. Sarah took my hand, squeezed it tightly. Granville, they've arrested them. Emily and Noah are safe, she said in a trembling voice. But the pain in me didn't ease. I thought of those nights when David would sit with me laughing, sharing small dreams. I believed him. I loved him. I thought he was a good father. Now all that remained was a ghost, someone who had wanted to destroy everything. A voice rang out on the radio, brief but authoritative. Both targets have been secured. Operation successful without losses. Outside, sirens turned on simultaneously. Red and blue lights rotated, reflecting off the old walls of the hotel. I heard patrol engines starting, voices giving orders, hurried footsteps. The night seemed torn by chaos. But for me, it was the sign that the net of fate had finally closed. A few weeks later, I sat in the courtroom of the federal court in Miami. The air was heavy, dense, as if the walls kept secrets. The benches were full of neighbors mixed with a few journalists armed with cameras and notebooks, their sharp gazes ready to record every moment. I held Emily and Noah tightly against me. The children snuggled against me, as if they sensed the tension in the atmosphere. Sarah was by my side, stroking my back, whispering, Granville, today everything ends. You have been very brave. But how could I feel strong if my heart was in tatters? The truth about David, about his terrible plan, was about to be brought to light, and I knew it would leave scars impossible to erase in me and my grandchildren. On the defendant's bench appeared David in the beige prisoner's uniform, hair tangled, no trace of the radiant son I had known. His face was emaciated, aged 15 years, eyes sunken as if his guilt also pursued him. Beside him, Richard trembled, hands cuffed, head bowed, unable to look at anyone. Seeing him, I didn't know what to feel. Rage, pain, or simply an icy emptiness in my chest. I had loved David. I had believed he was a good father. I even defended him in his arguments with his brother. But now he was just a stranger, a man who had tried to sell his own children as if they were merchandise. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a firm voice, stood up and began to speak. Your Honor, we are judging a particularly serious case linked to money laundering, conspiracy to kidnap children, and participation in a transnational criminal organization. He presented the evidence one by one, each like another stab in my heart. The transfer receipt with a huge sum appeared on the large screen, the red numbers making the whole room murmur. Then he showed a stack of forged passports, strange names that reminded of the criminal network in which David and Richard were involved. 3 plane tickets to Los Angeles, only in the names of David, Emily, and Noah, were projected, and made me tightly hold my grandchildren's hands so they wouldn't notice my trembling. But the moment that made the room explode was when the photo of Emily and Noah appeared, with 2 red and twisted circles marking their faces. Some women in the back rows exclaimed, "How horrible!" The murmur grew like a wave charged with indignation and horror. Immediately, I hugged Emily and Noah against me, covering their eyes. Grandpa, What is that? Emily murmured in an innocent voice. I stroked her head and answered in a broken voice. Nothing, my girl, just an old photo. But inwardly, I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry until I emptied myself. How could I explain to them that their own father had marked them as targets of a criminal case? The prosecutor continued, his voice increasingly sharp. While presenting the recording of the phone call that had changed everything, David's voice filled the room, desperate but icy. Richard, the children have disappeared. Without them, what will we negotiate with? Richard's voice responded brusquely. Go to the hotel first. The intermediary is waiting. The entire room remained silent. Only David's panting breath could be heard from the speaker. I heard every word, as if it were being engraved in my mind with a red-hot iron. Each of his phrases was a knife tearing apart the memories of the days when I believed he was a good father. David's defense lawyer stood up, trying to save him. Your Honor, my client is a victim manipulated by Richard Hayes. He didn't know about the trafficking network and had no intention of harming his children. But the prosecutor immediately replied, in a voice as sharp as a blade. In the recording, the defendant himself says he needed the children to negotiate. This is the act of an accomplice, not a victim. He pointed to the screen where the recording was repeated, and David's words resonated as an impossible confession to deny. Richard remained silent, head down, like someone who accepts his fate. When the judge's gavel sounded, the entire room stood still for a moment. So, the defendants, David Morrell and Richard Hayes, are sentenced to life in prison for money laundering, conspiracy to kidnap children, and participation in a transnational criminal organization, declared the judge, his voice grave and firm. The room exploded in comments. Some shook their heads indignant. Others murmured with horror. I remained seated, holding Sarah's hand, breathing relieved, but with a bitter knot in my throat. Justice had been served, but it couldn't erase the pain in my heart. Emily tugged at my shirt in a very low voice. Grandpa, where is Dad? My granddaughter's question pierced me like a knife. I hugged her tightly, unable to answer. How could I tell her that her father, whom she loved, was being taken away, handcuffed behind bars? Noah, sitting beside, raised his head with wide eyes. Did Dad go on a business trip? Grandpa? I simply nodded, tears flowing silently. Yes, he is very busy, but Grandpa and your Uncle Michael will always be here with you. They nodded, but I knew this truth would remain like an eternal scar in their hearts. When we left the courthouse, the burning midday sun fell directly on the square. People dispersed between laughter and conversations mixed with the noise of traffic. But for me, everything seemed to fade. Sarah took my hand, and in a soft voice said, Granville, you saved your grandchildren. You are their hero. I smiled weakly, but inwardly I didn't feel like a hero. I was just a grandfather trying to protect what was left of my family. The truth, although cruel, had finally been revealed. Several months have passed since the trial, and the lives of my grandchildren and mine have gradually found a new rhythm in Miami. I rented a small apartment near the central square, where every morning the church bells rang clearly, like a peaceful melody, pulling me out of nightmares about David and Richard. The apartment wasn't big, just a small living room, a kitchen corner, and 2 narrow bedrooms. But for me, it was a refuge, a new home for Emily and Noah. Every morning, I got up early, prepared breakfast, an egg sandwich for Noah, cookies with milk for Emily. I combed Emily's hair, adjusted the collar of Noah's uniform, and took them to the elementary school near St. Patrick's Church. seeing them run to class, waving to me with a radiant smile. I felt a spark of hope slip into my heart, although the pain continued to burn like an open wound. One afternoon, as I watered some chrysanthemum pots on the balcony, a yellow taxi stopped in front of the door. The door opened, and Michael got out with a travel bag on his shoulder and his shirt wrinkled after the long journey from Chicago. My son was visibly thinner, his face emaciated, eyes sunken as if they carried a story too heavy. I dropped the watering can. Suddenly water splashed on the floor, and I ran to hug him. "Michael, you've finally come back," I exclaimed in a broken voice, hugging him tightly, as if I were afraid he would disappear like those quiet days that were already gone. Michael hugged me, then knelt and opened his arms when Emily and Noah ran from inside the house, shouting with excitement. "Uncle, Uncle!" They threw themselves against his chest amidst laughter, and at that moment, I saw Michael's eyes shine, even if only for a second. That evening, all four of us sat around the small table in the kitchen. I prepared the beef stew that Michael had loved since childhood, the aroma of broth and vegetables filling the house with warmth. Emily told stories from school, and Noah showed a drawing that his teacher had complimented. But the atmosphere remained charged, as if we all knew there was a pending subject, something that needed to be said. After collecting the plates, I sent the children to their room to play with puzzles and sat facing Michael. "Son, I must tell you everything," I said in a grave voice, interlacing my hands to contain the trembling. I began to speak slowly since that afternoon at Mr. Thompson's dry cleaners, when I received the jacket and discovered the plastic bag with the transfer receipt and the photo of Emily and Noah marked with a red circle. I told him about the nocturnal train journey, the safe under the furniture, the plane tickets to Los Angeles without his name, and the trial where the terrible truth about David and Richard was revealed. Each word was like a stab, not only for me, but also for Michael's heart. He remained silent, running his fingers through his disheveled hair, eyes reddened. And when I told him the part where David called the children merchandise to negotiate, Michael hit the table with his hand, and in a broken voice said, "Enough, Dad." He stood up and began walking from side to side in the small room, as if he couldn't bear the weight of the truth. "Dad, in reality, I already suspected David for some time," Michael said in a voice full of anguish. He would leave early and return late. He would hide his phone, and suddenly large sums of money would disappear from the house. I would ask him questions, but he always said it was money from work. I didn't want to believe he could do something wrong. I thought he was protecting the family, but it turns out I was just an idiot. He stopped. He turned his face away. His shoulders trembled. I stood up. I took my son's trembling hand without saying anything, just silently sharing his pain. I knew Michael's suffering wasn't only due to his brother's betrayal, but also to the feeling of helplessness of not having been able to protect his nephew and niece, Emily and Noah. From the room, they came out silently, as if perceiving the tension in the air. "Grandpa, is Uncle sad?" Emily asked softly. I nodded. I drew her to me and added another piece of meat to her bowl. "Uncle is just tired from the journey. Eat quietly." Noah joined the conversation in an innocent voice. "Uncle, tomorrow we play with Legos together." Michael smiled weakly and stroked his head. "Yes, tomorrow we'll play." But I knew this smile was just a mask to hide his broken heart. After dinner, when the children were already deeply asleep in their room, Michael sat next to me and said firmly, "Dad, I'm going to ask for full custody of Emily and Noah. and with you, I'll rebuild a new life for them." I looked at him, and in his eyes, I saw a determination I hadn't seen in a long time. "Are you sure, Michael?" I asked in a trembling voice. He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I can't forgive him, Dad. It's not for me. It's for Emily and Noah. They deserve a safe life, and I'll do everything for them to be happy." I nodded, tears in my eyes. Finally, my son had found the courage to face the truth, as painful as it might be. That night, I stayed on the balcony, watching the small lit street. The yellowish light of the street lamps drew intermittent shadows, and from inside the house, Michael's voice reading stories to the children mingled with the crystalline laughter of Emily and Noah. And then the little teddy bear said, "I'm not afraid of the dark anymore." Michael read, and I heard Noah exclaim, "He's brave, the little bear." The sound of turning pages mingled with the ambiance, bringing a fragile but invaluable peace. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and felt a little warmth return to my heart. Time passed in silence. The small apartment I had rented truly became a home where, little by little, the wounds of the 3 generations healed. The court had already rendered its final verdict, granting full custody of Emily and Noah to Michael and me. Upon hearing the news, I sat on the couch holding a cup of hot tea tightly, with the sensation that the heavy stone that oppressed my chest had finally lifted. Every Sunday morning, I took Emily and Noah to the nearby park. The bells of St. Patrick's Church rang, mingling with the song of birds in the trees. Michael, who now worked stably in Miami, often played soccer with Noah on the green grass. The little boy with his small legs ran after the ball, smiling with all his teeth. "Uncle, kick hard." Meanwhile, Emily joyfully did tours on her tricycle around the fountain, her high ponytail waving in the wind. I sat on the bench, savoring a cup of hot coffee, watching the 3 play under the sun. Light filtered through the leaves, spreading golden flashes on the ground. And at that moment, I felt a peace I had never had before, as if the storm had passed and the sky was finally clearing again. One afternoon, the whole family went together to the market on the central square. The air was filled with the aroma of pancakes, grills, and fresh fruit. Emily, eyes shining, chose an old comic book herself at the bookstand, leafing through each page with enthusiasm. "Grandpa, this one has a princess riding a dragon," she exclaimed, showing me the book. I smiled. I stroked her head. "You've chosen very well. Tonight, I'll read it to you." Noah, on the other hand, insisted on a superhero-shaped balloon, tugging at Michael's shirt. "Uncle, buy it for me. Superheroes fly very high." Michael burst out laughing. He took out his wallet and paid while I silently chose the freshest bunches of vegetables, some very red tomatoes, and a bag of corn to prepare a beef stew. These simple moments, like small pieces of a puzzle, gradually recomposed the family that seemed to have broken. In the apartment, I hung on the living room wall the clumsy drawings of Emily and Noah. There were 4 people, me, Michael, Emily, and Noah, holding hands under a red roof with a big sun and some white clouds. Emily pointed to the drawing with pride. "This is our house, Grandpa, the red roof. I chose it because it's my favorite color." I looked at the image with a gentle smile, but I felt a knot in my chest. In the drawing, there wasn't their father, and I knew that despite all my efforts, this void would always be there. I just hoped that Michael's love and mine would be enough to fill a little of this absence in the children's hearts. Sometimes I would see David's image in the newspapers, usually in short notes about the case. accompanied by a photo where he appeared gaunt, lifeless behind bars. Each time, I would hide the newspaper, push it to the bottom of the trash, not wanting Emily or Noah to see it. They were too young to understand, and I didn't want their innocent smiles to be tarnished by a cruel truth about their father. But I knew that one day, I would have to tell them. I would have to explain why he was no longer there. This thought made me shiver, but I repeated to myself that when the time came, I would find a way to make them understand without this pain destroying them. In the evening, when Emily and Noah slept deeply, I would sit at the kitchen table and open the old journal I had begun to write since my first days in Miami. My hand, now less trembling, glided over the pages, leaving these words. Today, Emily drew a family. She doesn't know that this red roof is all we have, but I will do everything for it to always remain solid. They will grow up surrounded by love and truth, not lies or fear, and never again will anyone dare to use a red pen to mark their faces. I closed the journal, turned off the light, leaving only the sound of the peaceful breathing of my two little angels in the room next door, and the soft murmur of the night wind coming through the window. Sometimes in my dreams, I still see the image of David, not the one from the court, but that of the young man who one day entered timidly into my life with a bouquet of daisies in his hand and a nervous smile. I wake up and tears flow silently, not from nostalgia, but for the pain of a betrayed trust. But then I hear Emily call me joyfully from the living room, or Noah's mischievous laughter playing with his uncle. And I know I can't let the past pull me down again. I wipe my tears. I get up and I prepare for a new day for my little family. One evening, after reading a story to my two grandchildren, Michael stayed with me in the living room. "Dad, I found a stable job here," he said in a grave but firm voice. "I want to stay in Miami, raise the children with you. We'll make it, won't we?" I looked at my son and saw a determination in his eyes that I hadn't seen since he was a child. "Of course, son," I replied, taking his hand. "We'll make it because we have each other." Michael smiled, and for the first time in many months, this smile was no longer as heavy. In the darkness, as the streetlight filtered through the slits in the curtains, I realized that my family, after the storm, was truly born again. It was a painful rebirth built on the broken pieces of trust and love, but full of hope. I got up, went to the balcony, and looked at the quiet street. The church bells rang in the distance as a reminder that no matter how cruel the past has been, we, me, Michael, Emily, and Noah will continue to move forward with love as a beacon lighting the way. Deep in my heart, I understood that all that had happened was not only my family's tragedy, but also a warning for everyone. Sometimes the person who hurts you is precisely the one you trusted most. Naivety and blind faith can become the open door through which darkness enters. But I also understood that the love and courage of a father, a grandfather, always have the strength to protect and guide. I want to say one thing to everyone. Learn to observe carefully the strange signs. Don't close your eyes out of fear of facing the truth. The family is truly preserved only when we have the courage to defend it wholeheartedly and firmly, even in the face of the most painful betrayal. The story you've just heard has been modified to protect the identity of the people involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen to it and stop to reflect. How many fathers suffer silently in their own home? I really wonder if you were in my place. What would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to maintain peace? Or would you have the courage to face everything, to find your own voice? I want to know your opinion, because each story can become a candle that lights someone else's path. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.